This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with doctor and author Dr. Rob Bell. He discusses his work in the sports psychology area and why this can be so important to athletes, the importance of preparation for athletes so they can deal with challenges prior to them arising, and provides some great analogies that can be used in a practical setting. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Perfect. So, Rob, really appreciate you jumping on with me. I know we've caught up briefly then, and it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. But how are things your end? You all safe and well?
Brilliant, man. Doing great. Yeah. Love it over here. And I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm always excited to, hopefully the listeners can get, a couple pieces of information, man, that they can apply and love it.
Good. So, for people that might not have come across your work or don't know anything about you, do you want to give a bit of a whistle-stop tour about who you are, what you do, why you do it?
Oh, whistle stop tour. See, that's why I love it, man. I just wish, like, one of the characteristics I wish I had in life, man, was to have like the British wit, to be able to have that comeback so fast. I just never could do it, man. I was always like, I'd have to wait a little bit, then I would have the comeback. So I appreciate you mentioning that. It's been a distinguished road. I mean, I work with athletes, coaches, and teams on mental toughness, and that's two facets to it, right? Like mental toughness, a lot of definitions that are going to be out there, but I'm a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy. I try to keep it as simple as we can. It's how we perform in under pressure, and then how do we handle and cope with the setbacks and the adversity of life. And it's all I've ever wanted to do in life. I was played baseball and had a pretty significant injury in college that was self-inflicted. And I've found out about sports psychology, and it was tattooed in my heart. This is what I want to do with my life. And there are a lot of mountaintops to climb, definitely a lot of valleys to go through. But I love what I do, man, and just be able to help people get to where they want to go is just such a fascinating and rewarding path. And yeah, man, I've written working on my 8th book now, mental toughness. Written 7 books on mental toughness. Been fortunate enough to work with PGA Tour champions, all different sports. So yeah, that I guess a whistle stop tour, man. I love competing myself. I love competing myself too, man. I love doing ultra marathons and golf. Those are probably the main sports I compete in.
No, I think that's really interesting. A point I want to pick up there. You mentioned around your playing career and then how that has affected you in moving into this area. So for you, what was the realization that actually psychology or mental toughness was important within sport? And did that come from a particular example in your career growing up?
I think there's a couple of different examples. One, I was just an athlete that thought too much. It was like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. I just couldn't shut off my mind. And every time I would ask a coach about it, they could never really help me out. They just said, well, once the game gets started, it kind of goes away. And I was also an all or nothing type of player. Like I was the worst. I was the one that coaches hated because you didn't know who you're going to get, right? This could have been Taylor Swift. It could have been Lady Gaga. We don't know who's going to show up today. And coaches hate that. So I was either, when things were great, yeah, things were great. They were wonderful. But when things were bad, it was awful. There was no having a good, crappy day. There wasn't that. It was all or nothing. And I think those sort of experiences help like lead into, I think, the curiosity into the mental game. And that's definitely where it started. And then getting to experience firsthand, man, on so many different athletes. There's not one way to approach it. Everyone has different strengths. It's being able to find out, I think, especially when it comes to mental game, which one is your strength, which one can you focus on and make that ironclad. I think that's what becomes really important.
And what you've mentioned there a little bit is around the identification process. So when we look at this in younger athletes, how can you go around identifying whether they maybe do have high levels of mental toughness and resilience or don't, and who maybe we need to work with, or who it might be troublesome moving forward?
Well, I think speculation is the mother of all evil. What I mean by that is there'll be so many people that miss on athletes because we make a decision when they're, prepubescent 12-year-old. And, why do we miss? Because we made this impression of an athlete that has not fully developed yet. And if you like pop popcorn, it's the same thing, man. That's how development works, right? If you're like, this kernel right here, this is going to be the best tasting popcorn that there is, but they all pop at different times. You never pop popcorn and they all pop at once. And so to identify really gets difficult. So this is what I have seen, is that anyone who's really going to reach their full potential needs to be told at some point that they're not good enough. You can't do it. That's a bad idea. It's a horrible way to coach. It can ruin a lot of people. And I don't recommend that as the way to coach. But what I'm saying is only those who were told that reach their true potential. And the reason why is because there is no ambiguity when it comes to that. Those individuals are going to listen to the coach that cut them, or they're going to listen to themselves and their self-belief. There is no middle of the road. If you just get told as a young athlete how great you are, well, at some point, everyone's great. And then you really start to question it. Well, am I really that great? And then that becomes a really abyss type area to be in. And so that is the only indication that I know when someone was told that they weren't good enough. If you go and you ask anybody who's been super successful, who told you weren't good enough, and they can nail it, right? Hey, it was my 7th grade teacher, man, Mrs. Barlow. She said that. Or, I was on a developmental team. I got cut when I was 14. Every single one of them have it, because there's no ambiguity when it comes to that moment. So it's like when it comes to identification, yeah, it's rude and it's crude, but this is what I look for. Individuals whose circumstance has toughened them up because there was no other option. They had to be successful. Were they told that they couldn't be good enough? And what type of adversity have they overcome on their path towards where they're going? And I always look for those athletes and individuals that are going to be hungry. There's nothing that can derail somebody who is determined, whose time has come, and that they believe in themselves. It's the unseen, though. We don't see it. And that becomes really difficult in terms of trying to identify talent. But those are a couple of the things I really look at.
So why do you think it has such a profound effect or long-lasting effect on an athlete being told that they're not good enough or being cut?
Well, because it negatively can affect so many people. When you're cut, when you're told that you're not good enough, the potential right there, what happens is that we believe it. Like automatically we believe it. That person must be right. Maybe I'm not good enough. But then there's going to be somebody out of the shadows that comes along and says, man, you don't need to listen to that coach, man. You believe in yourself. And now they've got a different voice that comes alongside them. And that's the power of a coach. The power of somebody who's going to tell you you're not good enough. But then when you have somebody that's going to come alongside you, say, look, man, you got to keep working hard. Stay focused on today. Don't worry about, the long-term stuff. Stay focused on the short term and just keep getting better. It becomes the most powerful type of, if I look at like getting struck by lightning is very powerful. And if you get that word of criticism by somebody that's going to be close to you, tells you you're not good enough, that's like lightning. But then what do we have on our houses, right? We have these lightning rods that can protect us from that lightning. So all it takes is that one person that's going to come alongside us and help coach us up through that. Why do I think it's the most powerful? Because there's just no ambiguity. You cannot be in the middle when it comes to that. You can either believe that negative voice that tells you're not good enough, or you can believe in yourself. There's no middle of the road when it comes to that. That's why I think it's so powerful.
And do you think there's any way to prepare an individual to be ready for that moment so that they can get through it and overcome it? So I think of you mentioned earlier around, for some individuals, this is long-lasting effect, and they may not carry on sport, may not carry down the successful road they've been on, but for some individuals it really makes them. Is there any particular strategies you can put in place to help people overcome those moments or setbacks?
Well, I think it's a great point. And let me just reiterate that a little bit. I mean, just look at individuals that have dyslexia and the amount of people that have dyslexia that end up becoming millionaires. Here in the United States, if you look at immigrants, if you look at all millionaires, 30% of them are immigrants. Why is that? Because their situation forced them into something where success was the only other option. There's not going to be any plan B. There's a plan A, and that's it. And how do we get ready for that? Well, what I think is important is mental toughness it's caught more than it's taught. Your situation or experience is going to be, you're going to catch it. And when you get to be successful when you fail, both is going to happen. Now it's a fish or cut bait moment. Now you are left naked in front of the gods. What are you going to do next? Like, you have failed, you have missed. What now? And it's only in those moments then that the real human spirit can come out. So if mental toughness is caught more than it's taught, how do we prepare these individuals for that moment? And what I say is this, is you have to, in one way or another, coach them up that they are getting ready for some type of adversity, moment, or person that's going to make all the difference in their lives. They just don't know what it looks like or what's going to come. And so what are the areas right now that you need to prepare, that you need to work on? So when those moments hit, you're going to be ready. When that failure hits, how are you going to bounce back? What's going to be the feedback? Are you going to start blaming other people? Are you going to own it? And those are the sort of things that I think that we start to, coach them up on, because when those moments hit, it's too late to prepare. Like, they have to be ready. And that's the only part. And that's where, like, the mental game becomes so important, because if we wait till there's a real problem, it's too late. Then they get caught kind of in the abyss and the washing machine of development and kind of get spun out. And that's the power of the coach, and that's the power of the mental game, is trying to prepare them, letting them know that no matter how bad a situation is, no matter how bleak an outcome looks, it's only going to take one. It only takes one opportunity to make all the difference in your life. That's what you're getting ready for.
So in terms of like preparing an individual, so you mentioned there around, we want to prepare the people for that one moment, so that when that one moment does arise, they've got the tools they need to get through it and be ready to proceed. What type of strategies are put in place, or processes are put in place to try and prepare people for that?
That's a wonderful question, because I don't think there's one thing, right? I think there's a couple different layers to it. I think it always starts with the foundation of that as an individual. They got to know their identity. If all that they are is their sport or their performance, that's a rough road, because they are going to be the worst or they're going to be the best. And even when you're the best, you're not the best for very long. And now they're riding the roller coaster of their performance. So there has to be their identity in terms of who they are outside of the pitch, outside of the field, outside of the court, that who they are as an individual. That foundation has to be built. And that's where a lot of times that doesn't get built, right? They just win and do well and get the pats on the back, but the foundation isn't there. That foundation of who they are and their identity has to be first. Then from that, now we're molding the most difficult mental skill to teach, and that is the desire, the fire, that drive, motivation, right? That's the one that you cannot teach. That's the one where it's going to be caught, that negative experience that happens. Okay, now what? Now you missed the PK, right? To lose. Now what? Now that becomes the powerful impetus for them either getting better or getting worse. But that's the one skill that we can't teach. And that's the power, again, of the coach and the support that we come alongside. So once that foundation, their identity is as an individual, now you got to work on those mental skills of, what are the goals that they want? What are they willing to sacrifice for it? How hard are they really willing to work at it? And then you're working on the skills of confidence, their ability to focus, and then their ability to let go of mistakes and to be able to move on. All those skills get intertwined, and we're working on those, I think, on a continual basis. And if we look at any type of, mental skill work, you're addressing one of those, right? The motivation, confidence, focus, or refocus.
And so when you're looking at the younger athletes, how do you support them in terms of finding other identities? Because I could go on the internet now and look up 18-year-old quarterbacks top ranked in the US, and they're going to get offers from Alabama and Florida and whatnot. And a lot of their notoriety in their local high school or from teachers or whoever is going to come from the fact that they're a 5-star recruit who is going to potentially be a quarterback at Alabama. So how do you prepare them to say, listen, this side of you is brilliant, but actually we need other foundations in place, and then identify for them that will help their football potentially in the long term?
Yeah. Well, that's the importance of a coach. I think that's the importance of what's going to be, who's coming alongside them in that whole journey. Do they value them as an individual or just as somebody that can get the job done on the field? It comes then to the teachers, comes to the administration. Are they willing to push this player along because it's going to give notoriety then to the school? You got a lot of different factors, man, that come into play. And then how is it at home, right? If the home life, and it can always vary, right? But let's say if it's an individual that parents prop them up for what they do, it's going to be a hard fall, because at some point they are not going to be the best. They're going to encounter major struggle, and then they're always getting back to what's the foundation that they're built upon. Those that can handle defeat and major setbacks have the foundation in place. And it's not just one thing, man. It's having the coach, it's having that family structure, it's having those that are willing to speak truth into their life outside of what it is that they do. So if someone says, look, man, I'm a football player, even that alone, I'm a quarterback, even that alone, well, now you're saying that is who you are as a football player. You have to be an individual who plays football. You have to be a person who is a quarterback. And just even those little twists of vernacular make a difference in terms of their identity and who they are. If all they are their performance, rough road. But think about it, right? Here's the difficult part, is once you are a 5-star recruit, you're getting the pats on the back about how good you are. Boy, that feels good. There's nothing that feels better. But now what you have is now you become affirmation junkies. Now you get people that need that affirmation. They seek that affirmation. They want that affirmation because it feels so good. Then that becomes part of their identity and then who they are as an individual. Well, what I do is I just win. I'm successful, until they're not, until they go to Alabama. And now, wait a minute, I was recruited to be quarterback, but there's 2 other guys here that are just as good as or better than me. And then the spiral continues. So then that's why, because that I think becomes so difficult, is because of the pats on the back, because of the affirmation that they get out, because of what they do.
So is there any enforced road bumps you could put in from your end that would help someone? So is there anything you could do that you would recommend to, anyone listening who's got maybe a younger child or someone who plays football or a coach that works with young people, that you could put this type of practice in place and this might help them along the way or help them with challenges further down the line?
Yeah. I think winners don't do different things. They do things differently. And I think it's where's the standard that's going to be set? As coaches, we get what we tolerate. If we are not the hardest on our best player, then we're setting ourselves up for not having the whole team get into play. And when I mean we get what we tolerate, if that player is late, if that player forgets something in their bag and we let it go, what we're saying is that standard really isn't important. And you have to have, I think, those standards in place, and even starts at a young age, of how do we conduct ourselves off the field? What are the things that we do off the field? Because let's just look at grades, for instance, right? Man, most important, and it's a great athlete, but their grades are crap. Okay, why is that? Because we didn't put into play how important that is until it becomes too late, or until it becomes a problem. And then then you look at, okay, well, the motivation of an athlete, they say getting to this level is so important for them, but their grades are crap. Well, why is that? Well, what there really is that no, it's really not that important to them. And the problem with the mind itself, our mind, your mind, everyone's mind, is we want the path of least resistance to get to where we want to go. So it's only through those coaches, the most important people in somebody's life, is going to be that coach that sets that standard for them and how it is that we do things on and off the field becomes the overall development for them as a person. Let's say the individual makes it to the top level. Have we prepared them for that? But have we prepared them for after? Because even if they play 8, 10 years at the highest level, successful career, okay, well, then what? And that's where then a lot of athletes struggle again, because we didn't build the foundation for them. That's all they are. That's all they know. And then when they're done playing, they don't get the pats on the back anymore. And now their identity is, okay, I'm not my performance anymore. Now what it is that I do. All this process has to take place, I think, especially at a young level. And what are the standards that we set, and how do we approach all the little things in life?
I saw an interview the other day that touched on this subject a little bit, and it mentioned around people that have gone through having a lot of success, etc., and a lot of notoriety and a lot of attention, essentially. When it gets to the back end of their career and they're done, and then maybe not getting that attention, it goes either two ways. You either sail off into sunset and you have those foundations, or you start getting attention, and the only way you can do that is negatively. So that's then when you start acting out or you start causing problems, because actually the only way to get the attention off the people that you've had previously is to act out. Is that something that you've seen or would go along with from your experience?
Yeah, I see it all the time, especially when the foundation isn't there as an identity and all they are is their performance. Yeah, if they're not killing it on the field any longer, they're going to try killing it off the field one way or another, man, to get that rush, to get that high, to feel important, right? They're going to buy that car. They're going to buy that stereo system. But the problem is it gives us that high, but we always return back to the baseline. On my podcast, man, I had Barry Zito, who eloquently stated that, right? I mean, he had a $216 or $225 million contract, but was no longer the best. And talk about the struggle that he went through, because his identity the foundation wasn't there, man. So it was doing whatever he could to make sure inside felt great. Problem is that feeling doesn't last, and we always return back to the baseline of who we are and what it is that we do.
So moving on to that, because I think particularly in the NFL, there is a financial aspect to it. And, you know, if you get to NFL, you get out your rookie contract, you're doing really well. Obviously, you get rewarded relatively well for it. But what you see quite a lot is individuals receive a contract, they have a contract year on the last one, and then all of a sudden, the following year, it drops off the edge of the cliff. They talk about production going down. And now, listen, I know there's a lot of factors. It may be defenses are going tight at different schemes, etc. But I think it happens with such regularity. It does make me wonder whether some of it is motivational based. If your motivation is to get you and your family out, and all of a sudden you've got a 20 million contract and that's got you and your family out, is kind of what's next. Have you had any experiences with athletes in that scenario at all?
I mean, I don't even think you have to get to the professional levels to see that. I think you can just get to even the collegiate level or the next level, whatever that next level is going to be. You know, here in the US, it's all structured around that, especially not even playing at college, but D1 and D1 scholarship. You know, that's the gold at the end of the rainbow. And so what happens when you get that pot of gold? Man, you got it. Look, players, when they get to college, they get worse or they get better, but they rarely stay the same. Because what happens when you made it, right? Made it, got it. That feeling wears off. And then it's like, you know, they don't have that hunger of what they did because they reached their goal. And when you don't have that drive, when you don't have that insatiable appetite, obsession, if you will, to keep getting better, then you get worse. And once you start getting worse, and then once the bad performance comes in, then it becomes you questioning, the confidence level comes in there. I mean, then a whole lot. I always talk about it like you're just getting shot into the abyss, because there's never one thing, right? You get shot into the abyss. When you stare at the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back at you. So that's where working on individuals' goals becomes so important. All we do when we set goals is we set these outcome goals. Well, what happens when you reach it? What happens when you make the gold medal and then you're flying back from London or Rio or Tokyo, and now what? Well, I've spent all this time to get this. Hopefully I got it. If you didn't, it's still a struggle, but okay, now what? You're always falling back to who you are as an individual in that foundation. That's why that becomes so much more important of, are we developing individuals, well-rounded individuals, or are we just focusing on their performance and their athlete, not who they are as a person? And kind of to that point as well, it's like, parents are so important to this process, because what I see now is the whole goal is to prepare your child for the path. But what we've done now is we've tried preparing the path for the child. We tried letting them know where the roadblocks that they're going to face and how they're going to have to navigate this. And they just play the system well. And when they reach the goal, that's why I think if we need to look at talent identification, you got to find somebody that is not satisfied, that is hungry. And when they reach that goal, they're still going to stay hungry. And those are special people. They're special people, because you can be pleased with your performance, but never satisfied. And that's a real rare place to kind of be, because you're always continually just focused on getting better and seeing how good you can really be.
Is there any ways you would identify that? So if you're in a room with 100 athletes and you're looking at them and you're going, right, this is one of my key characteristics that I look for in an athlete. Is there any strategies you have to identify someone who's got that drive to constantly be better and never be satisfied?
You have to see them when stuff does not go well. I think you have to see them when things aren't going well. Because when things are great, like what Martin Luther King said, right? You have to see people enduring times of adversity. That is when you can really uncover what's going to be their go-to mechanism. Are they going to own it? Are they going to blame? Are they going to kind of dismiss it? You can see then where it's going to kind of go. And then the other part is, and this is what's difficult, but it's like mental toughness. It's really tough I know I defined it, but it's really tough to define it. But when you know it, when you see it, and it's not all or nothing, but when you know it, you see it. You can see it in their eyes. You can tell about when they show back up after they've had a major defeat, when they've really had it handed to them, and then they show back up. That's the only times that you can really tell is, does someone really have that drive and that hunger to be the absolute best that they can be? And, then it's getting back to like the structure, everything that's around them. I talked to a Hall of Fame boxing coach. He told me this one time, because I asked him the same question. I said, how do you know when you get a boxer that's really mentally tough? He said, when they get beaten up and they show back up the next day. So it's the only time you can really tell. And I love that answer, man, because I think that's just, they've got to be exposed to the adversity, and then you see what they are as an individual.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I guess the challenge is from team to individual sport. As an individual, you have no get out. So in a boxer's context, it's like, I wasn't good enough. It's on me. I was the one who got beaten in the ring. I was the one who got knocked out. Whereas in a team context, you're trying to keep an eye for those people who are blamers and say, well, if the quarterback had thrown to me more, we would have won. Or, if the play calling had been different, we would have won. Or if I got better service, we would have won. So it's trying to wrap that into one in a team context. How can I break that down as an individual?
This is the part that I look at too. Like, it's, as coaches, have we set up the structure where there's going to be adversity that they're going to face? And then how do they navigate that and then deal with it? Because then you're going to be able to see at the practice level, when they've encountered adversity, whether through a drill, through some type of challenge that they need to overcome. All even sport context, right? I don't think you need to like throw them out into the woods and, hey, find your way back sort of thing. But even in the sporting context, when they're faced with the adversity, you're going to be able to tell, hey, who are the finger pointers? Who are going to be those that encourage one another? And then you're going to be able to see, because what happens during Tuesday is exactly what's going to happen like during the game. You know, we play like we train, but if we haven't exposed them to this type of challenges and then we can see what we're going to get, that becomes so important. Is if we know we got a blamer, if we know we got somebody that's going to point the finger, how do we then as coaches are able to coach them through that and let them know, look, there's a better way to be able to do this. And now you got to peel away the layers, right? Well, why are they blaming? And how then as a coach can I help them with a different skill set that's not going to be the best way and it's not going to work. You can blame them outside, you know, of where we're here. And what I mean outside, not in public or anything like that, but it's like, you know, on your own, but not in the sport of like, of the actual context of how we're trying to play and where we're trying to go, like as a team. You set up the challenges, and then it's all the power is always in the debrief. And how do we coach them up through that process?
This might be a challenging one for you to answer. Do you pull your hair out with some of the practitioners that you watch? Because you know, you watch documentaries over in the UK. The example I'll give is Last Chance U. You've got a couple of coaches there that are quite brutal with their athletes. Obviously, if you're involved in sport, you'd probably see it going to training grounds or coaching sessions or that type of stuff. Do you find it frustrating to go and watch a team where they purely focus on results and performance and then don't equip the young people with these skills or the football practice that you're talking about now?
We are in such a short microwave society that it's about, you know, how good you are right now. And it's not about long-term development, because coaches have pressure on them. They have pressure on them from administration. If you're a coach and the administration does not have your back, you're in a tough spot. You're going to be focused on results. And because we are in a results business at some point or another, right? It is about the results. But like a focus on winning doesn't lead to winning. A focus on the process does. And so I think the majority of what happens is we become only focused on winning, only focused on results, only focused on statistics. And when we become only focused on that, then emotion gets involved. Then fear gets involved. And when you lead from a place of fear, now you're going to lead with anger, lead with frustration. Now you're going to make mistakes. And it's the emotion that's kind of going in there. So I ask coaches, look, what type of coach do you want to be today, regardless of the outcome? Because as coaches, we have to become, it's not like the outcome doesn't matter, but we have to become disengaged a bit from the outcome, because our job is to be able to coach them up, and it's going to be the debrief. But the more and more that emotion gets played into it, I think that's when we make mistakes as coaches. And then, you know, it can only be like what's going to be our mindset heading in. I think that's where coaches can really benefit from that. What type of coach do I want to be? What's the message I want to be today? And I'm going to do that regardless of how well they practice or how well their effort is. Boy, that becomes then the really difficult part. But that's where you become a better coach and make a bigger impact.
And is there any individual that springs to mind that you've worked with or seen who's made really good strides in this area? Maybe someone that was emotional and linked it all to performance, and actually going through these type of conversations with you where they've gone, actually, yeah, this might be a better avenue and better process to go down, and this will help me and the kids in the long term.
Man, and that's why coaches are my favorite people. They really are, man, because I've seen so many of them. Some of them get it early, some of them get it later. And it just doesn't become about winning so much as doing the best that you can absolutely do. and they become so focused on that process. That's what the best coaches do. They have a standard of how we approach things on a day in and day out basis, on the field and off. This is the standard that we have. And then it becomes a relentless focus on the now and the present moment. And what are we doing to get better at that process? So any coach is going to say, yeah, we're focused on the process. But how do they do it becomes a whole nother story. And it's kind of like when it's all said and done, more said than done. When you can see the coaches that really focus on the process and getting better and coaching them up, it's you just see it. It's just one of those things that you know. And those, I think, are the coaches that last the test of time.
And what steps or what practices do they put in place? Is there any particular debriefs they use? Is there any particular strategies with their assistant coaches they use? Is there anything that springs to mind that consistently works across all those coaches?
I think those coaches have a constant need to get better themselves. I think when you see a coach that is consistently working on themselves in one area or another, reading books, going to conferences, learning from other coaches, that's the best type of education that you can have, right? What are we feeding our mind? What are we feeding our mind? Who are we surrounding ourselves with? If you are a head coach and you have 3 negative coaches around you, what are the potential of you impacting them positively or those 3 coaches impacting you negatively? Like then there's the battle. So it's like, what are you feeding your mind on a consistent basis? And I think we have to marinate our mind with this insatiable need to keep getting better ourselves. And how are we communicating with ourselves? Like, what are the things that we say to ourselves? And then how are we marinating our mind with the positivity and the confidence that we need to communicate ourselves, to our players, to our athletes, to those individuals, because we can't pour from an empty cup, man. And so many times I see coaches that have ragged themselves dry because they got an empty cup and they're trying to pour from it. And you have to have an abundance mindset. You have to have a mindset that, look, we're good and we're going to get better. And the outcome is important, but we're not going to only focus on that. And when you get that, it becomes part of the communication. It becomes really just the fabric of who you are as a team and how you approach different things.
And do you think that longevity comes because, like you said there, in terms of having a bigger cup to pour from and stuff, all of a sudden, if you've got one way of dealing with an issue and you do this for 10 years, all of a sudden that one way may no longer work. Whereas if I keep improving and developing myself, I may end up with 4 or 5 different cups that I can pour from, which allows me to then, use different skills at different times to affect the individual I'm working with. So do you think that the longevity of coaching careers quite often is down to those who are willing and able to soak up information from all other avenues and then use it at the right time?
Amen. If you listen to like the very first Beatles album, right? The Beatles didn't stay the same band throughout all their whole career. Same thing with the Rolling Stones, right? They changed. The reason why Bob Dylan was so great is because Bob Dylan's original stuff, wasn't the same. So you have to modify as being a coach, and that's how using those different resources and getting better, then you're able to make adjustments. And that's what the best coaches do. The best coaches are make adjustments. If we have one way and this is going to be our only way, it's great when it's successful until it's not successful. And then it's like, well, how have we gotten better and how have we modified and improved? So that's why I always look at those that are going to have different resources to pull from they're the coaches that just keep continually getting better.
Perfect. So I think we've gone quite a lot into the setbacks and stuff.
Didn't you like that? Didn't you like that Beatles and Rolling Stones
did, yeah.
reference?
It's a good analogy, and I'm just thinking back to artists. You're right in terms of transformation and how they change over time. It is because of, you develop over time. If you stand still, everyone will go, "Oh, no, I've heard that. We're good, thanks."
Yeah, but then think about it, right? Think about the criticism that individuals have, like Bob Dylan when he went electric guitar. pissed off all the people that just folk singers, and they were like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And it's like, he realized that I'm growing as a person, and you can stay where you are, but I'm growing, I'm getting better. And so you're not always going to please everybody with that process of getting better and then trying to do different things. Change is the hardest thing for mediocre minds to deal with. But change and making adjustments is how greatness is achieved. Sorry for the tangent, man. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. To be honest, it's quite a nice segue. So I said we've done a lot with the setback side. So now I'd be really interested in the pressure side of mental toughness. So when we're talking about even that outside pressure, external factors from crowds, from, bosses, from organizations, etc., how are you preparing the athletes you work with to deal with those pressures in an external context?
Yeah. Well, a couple of different factors. If we're flying, and I always like this one because I'll have a water bottle, drink some out of it. And then what happens when we've landed, right? That water bottle itself has kind of crushed, because is it the pressure from the outside or is it the pressure from inside? It's because the contents from the inside were gone. And yeah, there's pressure from outside. There's always going to be pressure. Number one, back to the foundation identity you are as a person. If this is all you're going to do, then there's going to be pressure from outside. And the better you get, the more pressure that there's going to be. But I also think the better that you get, the more important mental toughness is off the field than it is on the field. And so I look at it as, who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are the people that are really important in your life? And you find the real important people that are going to be in your life are rooting for you. They want you to be successful, but they're not the ones that are putting the pressure on you. If you feel the pressure from those that are going to be on your inner circle, that's where the real pressure comes from. And so I kind of put that out there because the pressure from external is knowing that you cannot please these individuals. No matter what you do, you can't please them. And if you're playing to please them, if you're playing for the pats in the back, it's a bad motivation to be in with, man. It's nice, it's wonderful, but that can't be the reason why you're playing. And it can't be the part of your identity that becomes most important. And that's where I see that athletes and coaches fall down that trap of wanting the affirmations. And then what happens when they lose? I always ask coaches this, right? How many people, you or just with a player, you make that shot, you win that game. How many people are blowing you up on social media telling you, man, great shot, way to go, awesome shot, so proud of you. Well, when you miss the shot, how many people are blowing you up? Right? None. Zero. Maybe one, and then that becomes the most important person. So you can't please them. And the better you are, the more criticism that you're going to get from no matter what you do. And I think it's just part of that process about being able to coach them up on that and letting them know who they are as an individual and what is this path going to look like? And is it something that they want to go down? Some people don't want to go down that path because they are in the spotlight too much. And you've got to know that that's the path of you're going to face criticism, and for something that was done or wasn't done, and that's the thing now, right? It's like we're going to take a sound bite from somebody who is 17 years old and criticize them for that they did 5 years ago and say, well, look at that individual, right? They're such a hypocrite. You're telling me that we need to judge people on like who they were like as a little teenager, and that's what we do now, right? If we can't criticize them for who they are right now, we got to find something to criticize them about, and that's what we do. So it's like, if we worry ourselves about what other people think, that's not the path for us, right? You should do something where you're not going to be criticized. And I'll tell athletes this too. I said, look, if you are getting criticized, you're doing something right. You know why? Because they don't boo nobodies. They don't boo nobodies. If they're booing you, you're doing something right. And that's the part that I see. Sorry for the tangent, man, but I see it too much. It's like, we're judging somebody from 5 years ago. That means that they can't change as a person. That means that's who they are, right? That's who they were at 15 years old. The mistake that they made, that's who they are now. But we do that, And that's the part where I look at social media. It's the same thing, man. It becomes the petri dish of just this insipid, rancid, um, criticism of people and things and of ideas because they're unhappy with themselves.
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts recently, and they not too complimentary of social media, and I think that is one of the issues. Why, in terms of people, I think most athletes who actually stay off of it and have people that just take care of it for them and don't read comments or don't really listen, probably the ones that are psychologically a lot more healthy than those that spend a lot of time on there and clap back and all that type of stuff.
I
Because
totally agree. And that there's a challenge, right? I went through a 90-day detox last year from all social media. And one of them was because my account got hacked, right? And there wasn't anything I could do about it. And, so I shut it all down. And yeah, it was a little bit sketchy, man, because a lot of my, message and content goes through those channels. And, but I tell you what, after a couple of weeks, man, my mind was even that much clearer, it was that much more focused, and it wasn't about any type of like distractions, because I'll hear something as well and I'll ruminate about it. And I'll think about it, and and it just takes me kind of away from like the present moment, what I'm doing. So I'll always say that, man, there's a great test, right? See if you can go 90 days without it.
I'll be honest, I'm not a big one for it. I do it for this, but I think if on my personal Facebook account, I think I send a happy birthday to my other half, Christmas pictures, and wedding anniversaries. Beyond that, I don't think I've posted since 2014. So it's pretty good going, to be fair.
My man. Well, see, then you don't have stuff to criticize you about, so it's good.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I look in the pictures, but we won't get into that. So yeah, in terms of internally, so the process for individuals to be able to cope. You're the 18th green at the Masters, and you've got this putt to win, or it's the final shot in the NBA Finals. The ball's coming to you to make that 3-pointer. What type of processes, or what type of strategies, or what work do you do for an individual to hopefully allow them to execute that skill well in that moment in time?
Yeah. Well, I think you need to look at the context. And I always try teaching athletes, you got to play the sport, not the context. Just because it's the Masters of the 18th, now if you start doing something different, now you're playing the context. But if you look at an individual who is going through their routine, which is what I'm going to get back to, the big part is their routine. But if somebody making a putt as opposed to somebody catching a ball and shooting it, well, one's a closed sport, one's an open sport, one's an open skill, one's where there's no thought whatsoever. So if you break it down to, okay, now you got a free throw. Well, now you got time there. And what you're really getting back to is their ability to focus on the process and what they're trying to do. And it does not mean the movement itself. It means, have you developed a routine that allows the performance just to happen? It just allows it to happen. You just do it. And you don't have to think about doing it. Because once you start thinking and playing at the same time, it's kind of barbecue. You can't do it. So it's always getting back to what's the routine that you kind of have in place. And that's what we're always getting back to, is how well have you developed that routine, that the only thing that you're focused on is the execution.
I've heard a little bit of talk around trying to ground yourself in those moments where you're feeling high anxiety or high stress levels. I guess in a way, that's what you're talking about there, in terms of grounding yourself to the moment and not overthinking or getting overworked up, but just focusing on the task that's ahead of me right now.
Yeah. And it's about creating practice and competitions so you know where your mind is going to go when you are faced with that type of pressure circumstance, right? What are your hands going to be telling you, right? I mean, how sweaty are they going to get? Or where's your mind going to go? The thought racing. And if the first time you're going to experience that as at the highest level, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I'm not saying you can't do it, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. If you've encountered this through practice and competitions along the way, you know where your mind's going to go. It's not going to be a secret. You're going to know how to combat it. And that's where I think then that's the importance of always getting back to that preparation piece.
So when you're reviewing that with someone, what type of thing would you do? So I think that's really interesting what you're saying there. For Tom Brady, his first Super Bowl and going and making that fourth quarter drive is probably a lot more nerve wracking than his 27th one or whatever he's about to be in. So when you're looking to do that review piece with someone and say, actually, where did your mind go? Physiologically, how did you feel? How do you go around getting them to actually be self-aware enough to make notes or voice notes, whatever that is, so they are aware of it the next time it comes up?
Right. And I think that's the beauty about coaching and coming alongside individuals is once they can let me know, man, it's a real gift because now that's exactly what's going to show up next time. That's the demon. How are we going to combat that demon? And it's just the debrief, man. It's just having the conversation. It's just going through it with them and letting them know that's what's going to show up. If you get somebody that's really self-aware, then you're debriefing them on where have they been in those pressure circumstances before, and then not necessarily the outcome, but how they did, because they're still going to get juiced up. It's just how they kind of channel that. And I always share this with my athletes is we play like we train. We play like we train. If we don't face any adversity at all in our training, and the adversity that we're going to face is during the competitions or at a different stage, it's going to be a lot more difficult. We play like we train. We have to set up our trainings so there is that pressure and there is that adversity that we need to overcome.
And would you ask them to like narrate? So if you, say, for example, it is a putt and we've got the camera on them and then you're coming back and you're debriefing a couple of days after, would you ask them to narrate how they're feeling, or would you ask them to diarize it that evening? How, in terms of a tangible action for them, how would you get them to actually tangibly do that type of reflection?
I think as a coach, it's being able to ask the questions. It's being able to ask the what and the how questions of what were they feeling, what was going on, how did they cope with it, what was their strategy. Some of them right, some of them don't. I think it's just being about working with the athlete you got. The part that I just know that's where the real juice lies, it's always in the debrief. It's always going to be afterwards. And what did we learn from that instance? And how did that prepare us for the next time?
Yeah, no, that's good. And then how does this transfer into a business context? So obviously we've spoken extensively around this in sport and how trying to maybe create speed bumps helps, or how to deal with external, internal pressures. When we're looking at this in a business context and the type of leadership people can put in place and how you can support staff or challenge staff so that during stressful periods of your yearly cycle, they're able to cope with it. How does this type of work transfer, and what experience have you got in that field?
Man, since the pandemic, executives was never anything that I really focused on, right? I just wanted coaches and athletes. Since the pandemic hit, executives have become, I pick and choose now exactly who it is that I want to work with and who it is that they want help, because everything became so scrambled during that time. And the reason why I share that is because I just think everybody needs a coach. Coach is somebody that takes you someplace you want to go. If you want to go fast, man, go alone. But if you want to go far, you got to go together. You got to find somebody that you can confide in, know, and trust, and that can help you get to where you want to go. That's the power of a coach. And organizations that don't have that in place are going to struggle. They really are at some point, because they're not helping their individuals cope with that process of when they're going to struggle. And that's why I think everybody needs a coach, man.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think how many companies are open-minded enough to get someone in to work with them, and how many leaders in high up organizations are willing to have someone come in and challenge them and say, actually, you're not supporting your staff. So yeah, they're fine at the moment, but X, Y, Z may happen under stressful circumstances. From your perspective, are there a lot of companies that are open-minded to this, or is this still something that's in its infancy?
But it just depends. You show me a company that cares about its people and really, and it's not just in a mission statement, but they really focus on their people. They focus on serving them and I will show you a company that's on the right path. And if you get individuals that they're only focused on the short term, stock price, shareholders, and what they say is, well, we value our people, but it's just lip service. I'm going to show you a company that eventually is going to be on the decline, because it just does not work, and it's not sustaining. It's really not. Look, anybody can, I wouldn't say anybody, but there are people that will have success. But what's really important is the sustained success, the year to year improvement. And the only way they do that is when they become focused on their people and improving as a culture, improving then as leaders themselves. And if you get that, you get special organizations. And it's the same thing, man. It's just like with every athlete, every business isn't exactly the same, but every athlete that's has potential isn't going to reach the next level, because businesses have different agendas, and business have different bottom lines. If you reward somebody for this behavior, they're going to do that behavior. But does that behavior really impact the overall company, or just their section of the company? So then you got a whole lot of different factors that kind of come into play.
And does this change generationally? Because I'd imagine if you have a 50-year-old who's had certain life experiences compared to a 24-year-old who's just come out of college and has very different ones, they've grown up in different eras with different types of teaching, all that type of stuff. How does generationally, does that change this type of work?
That's a great one. I think the only thing that's a little bit different is it's tough to answer. And I guess the reason why it's tough to answer is because, I'd be generalizing too much, and I try to stay away from it, right? But I know with individuals that are going to be a little bit older, the only difference is now they have wisdom, and you get wisdom through experience. But has that been good wisdom, or has that been experience that hasn't helped them? And now, but it's just a different tack then that you take kind of as a coach. Individuals who are going to be younger, they don't have wisdom. They don't have the benefit of that. So what do they have instead? Well, they have knowledge, and they're going to have more, maybe more desire, right? More eagerness, depending on where they want to go. And so it's just working with the individual that you have, and everyone's a little bit different, man.
Perfect. No, really, really interesting. I think the wisdom thing's a big one, and probably how you can utilize that in a company setting is great. So the last question is something I ask everyone, which is, who's the most impressive coach or athlete you've worked with, and why?
Man, I mean, there's been so many, because even with some of the coaches that I never really connected with on a real deep level, I still learned from. I learned maybe how I don't want to do things, or I learned one technique from them. It's really difficult for me to say that, man, about, hey, this is the most important one. If I have to, yeah, I mean, I've got, jeez, man, that's a tough question, dude. It's really tough. And I'm not one to like cop out of answers. I would rather say like, who are my favorite coaches that I haven't worked with.
Do that then. Do that. Go down that route. That's absolutely fine.
All right. Well, I would say, I would definitely say it would start with Pat Summitt. I think Pat Summitt, University of Tennessee, her process, the way she developed it, the way she impacted so many different people, would be the epitome of coaching. Now, did she rip into players? Yeah, but she had the standard of what she had set and became focused on, this is how we do things. And man, generational success of what they had, and totally changed the entire game. Obviously, a lot of people would say John Wooden, Anson Dorrance, and I love Pep, man. I think Pep, watching just that football is enjoyable, and he's a guy that I think gets it and gets focused on the process as well. and always continually getting better. Those are a couple. And I guess Pep is the one that's probably like modern day. Anson Dorrance is as well. But I think those are some incredible coaches.
No, brilliant. Some great answers there. And for listeners that don't know them, they can go and do a little bit of digging on those people, which is great. So listen, Rob, a really interesting conversation. Loads of great tidbits that people can go and take with them. And yeah, really appreciate your time and hopefully catch up with you again soon.
Cheers, man.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.